Hello, Wansee. You can call me Billy. I'm a black Indian girl living in Suriname with my parents, and at the time, my grandmother. This happened when I was about 7 years old. I used to share a room with my 14-year-old sister, who we'll call Tiffany. Our room was on the second floor. Now, as a kid, I'd always see things that felt a little off, but I never really thought anything of it until this night. I was asleep on the top bunk. Tiffany was on the bottom. In the middle of the night, I woke up for no reason. I glanced around the room, then looked at the clock. It read 3 a.m. My bed faced a window, and because of the balcony light outside, the curtain was just see-through enough to make out shapes. I was just about to drift back to sleep when I looked over, and I saw it. A small, childlike hand pressed against the window, just resting there behind the curtain. I was petrified. I went to a Christian school, so the first thing I did was hide under my blanket and start praying. I prayed so hard I couldn't even think straight. The next morning, my eyes immediately went to the curtain, but there was no sign of a hand. But here's the thing, we were on the top floor. It was impossible for anyone to be standing outside our window. I never told anyone about what I saw. I was 7, and I knew no one would believe me. That night, I hesitated, but I went to bed anyway. And again, I woke up in the middle of the night. My eyes landed on the window, that same childlike hand, pressed against the glass. Just a hand, no arm, no shadow, just a hand. This time, I whispered, "Tiffany, Tiffany," trying to wake her up, but she didn't move. I lay there, frozen with fear, unable to sleep. I hid under my covers again and prayed to God to please make it go away. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke up, the sun was shining through the curtains, but I was still shaken. Later that evening, I went to the upstairs living room where my grandmother stayed. She was the only person I felt I could talk to. At first, she was skeptical, but the more I told her, the more seriously she listened. I've always been a grandma's girl. It was easy to tell her everything. She handed me a small Bible and told me to keep it under my pillow. I didn't want to tell my parents. I knew they wouldn't believe me. And when I finally did, I was right. They laughed and told me it was just a dream, my imagination. That night, I fell asleep with the Bible still under my pillow. And for the first time, I slept peacefully. No hand, no waking up. Now that I'm older, I've learned more about the legends in my country, and I realized that hand I saw, it was most likely a bakru, a small childlike creature from our folklore. It has all the same characteristics of a child, but isn't. And if you think that was the end of my experience with the paranormal, think again. This was just the beginning. My name is Carol, and I want to share with you a true story that has haunted me since 2010, when I was just 14 years old. Back then, I lived in a quiet apartment complex called Questons Avenue. It had 5 buildings. I lived in the B building on the first floor. Directly across from my building was the D building, where I used to attend tuition classes. And just beside the D building, there was a small, obscure security door. It was always closed. I had never seen anyone use it. It felt like it had been forgotten. By the residents, by the guards, by everyone. My daily routine was uneventful. I'd leave for class around 4:30 p.m., and by 6:30, I'd be on my way home. The walk from my building to the D building took about 20 minutes, time I usually spent daydreaming or chatting with friends. One evening, after class, my friend and I walked out together. We were laughing, sharing snacks she'd brought along, but she soon had to leave for another class, and I was left alone, slowly finishing the last few bites on my way home. That's when I noticed him, a man, tall, gaunt, and unnerving, emerging from that strange security door, the one no one ever used. His movements were off, like he was struggling to control his own body. His limbs twitched, and his walk was very jerky. Each stride looked stranger than the last, and he was looking down at his feet the whole time, almost as if he knew that he was walking in a strange manner. But then he looked up, and his eyes met mine. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. His face was unsettling. His eyes were too wide apart, and his jaw hung at a crooked angle, like it wasn't aligned with the rest of his face. He stared at me. I tried to ignore him, focused on my snack, but then he moved. He didn't just walk toward me, he lurched, and his slow stagger turned into a predatory stride. Before I could react, he was right behind me, yanking my bag with so much force it nearly pulled me off balance. I spun around. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest. Up close, he was horrifying. Those same wide, bulging eyes, that distorted jaw, and a twisted grin full of something I can only describe as malice.
"Do you have any money in your bag?"
he asked. His voice was a low, gravelly rasp that made my skin crawl.
No, I don't.
I stammered, my hands shaking. He didn't blink. He stared, deep and cold. Then his eyes darted to the nearby benches, where a few people had started watching us. Their concerned expressions seemed to break the spell for a moment. That's when he laughed, but not like a normal person. It was a hollow, mocking laugh, like something pretending to sound human.
"Why are you so scared?"
That was enough for me. I yanked my bag from his grip and ran. I ran as fast as I could back to my building, all the way to my front door. When I got home, I was out of breath and terrified. I told my parents everything. They were horrified and told me that if I ever saw the man again, I was to call them immediately. They wouldn't hesitate to report him, but I never saw him again. A few days later, one of my friends said she saw the same man I described. She thought he might have been drunk, considering there were a few liquor shops nearby. She said that after I left, his face turned pale and he stumbled back to that same security door, the one he came out of, and then vanished. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but that image of his face, that moment he grabbed my bag, still lingers in my mind. This happened about a month ago when my siblings and I arrived in Mexico to visit family. It was only our 4th day there when we visited my step-grandmother's family in a town called San Pedro. It was beautiful. There was a big park in the center of town, and my step-grandmother's family owned a tiny restaurant right across from it. I asked my grandpa if we could go buy a volleyball. He said yes, so we went out, bought one, and came back. That's when we were introduced to our step-cousin. Let's call her Rose. She was super friendly and offered to show us around. She led us to the volleyball nets in the park. The court had a big net around it so the ball couldn't go flying off, and there were other people playing behind us. We started a game and we were having fun until my little sister pointed something out. She said there was a guy walking around the court and that he had been waving at her earlier. I looked over and saw him sitting on a bench outside the court, close to where we were playing. I didn't think much of it at first. There were a lot of people around, but now that I think about it, it was strange how he chose to sit so close to us when there were plenty of empty benches. The time was 10:34 p.m. when we decided to head back to the restaurant. That's when Rose asked if we wanted to explore another park, one that was behind the restaurant, up a small hill. We said sure, and she led the way. As we were walking uphill, Rose stopped to point out the mountains that surrounded San Pedro. She started telling us stories about how she'd climbed them all before, and we all listened as we kept walking. When we got to the second park, we were still getting to know Rose. It was our first time meeting her after all. But my brother started acting off. While we all sat on the grass, he stood. He didn't say why, but looking back, it makes sense now. While we were chatting, my little sister suddenly asked,
"Did you guys see that guy too?"
We all looked at her.
"The guy from the volleyball court,"
she said.
"He was waving at me."
And then, just as she said it, he showed up. We all froze. He walked into the park and sat at the back, but slowly started making his way closer to us. Rose stood up and said,
"Let's move."
We were all aware of him now. We moved to the opposite end of the park where he had been sitting. Then he started heading in our direction once again. That's when Rose said,
Run!
And we did. We sprinted out of the park, running left. The guy ran right, and then he vanished. We couldn't see him anymore. I'll be honest, at first I was laughing. I thought it was all just some weird moment. My older sister laughed too, but my little sister, she was shaking, almost in tears. My brother was quiet and calm, but I could tell he was angry. I held my little sister and told her,
It's okay. He didn't follow us.
Rose, still catching her breath, kept saying she'd never seen that guy before. Nothing like that had ever happened to her. We decided to go back to the restaurant. Our family was there. It felt safer. But just as we turned the corner, my little sister screamed.
He's right there! That's him!
The guy suddenly jumped over the fence and started running full speed at us. Rose and my little sister sprinted toward the restaurant. My brother stood his ground and told me and my sister to run. But I froze. He was right there, standing in front of us. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a weird encounter anymore. This was dangerous. I grabbed my sister's hand and my brother said,
Go.
He stayed behind to block the guy's path. We ran. I remember hearing my brother say, I don't want any problems. When we got to the restaurant, my sister and I were telling our grandpa and Rose's cousin what had happened. Rose was shaking as she explained everything. Her mom and my step-grandmother rushed over and asked what was going on. I checked on my little sister. She was in tears. I hugged her and told her she was safe now. Eventually, my grandpa, Rose's cousin, and my brother came back. Rose's cousin explained that the guy was yelling at my brother, claiming his house was right there where my brother had stood. But Rose's cousin said he didn't live there. He lived further away. I asked my brother if he was okay. He said yeah, but the guy tried to pick a fight and then flipped him off. But the guy didn't leave it at that. He ran across the road, tore a branch off a tree, and screamed like a maniac, staring right at us the whole time. We believed he was on something, just by the way he walked and acted, but we'll never really know. It might not sound scary to someone else, but that night left us shaking. And the worst part, he had a bag with him. And to this day, I can't stop wondering what could have been inside it. We were lucky we didn't see him again and the rest of the trip was safe, but we were always looking over our shoulder. Let this be a reminder, always be aware of your surroundings and who is watching you. My name is Theodore and I come from Greece. I want to share a horror experience that happened about 10 years ago when I was about 11 or 12 years old. It was the holidays and we were staying at my grandparents' house. My brother and I usually slept in the double bed in the living room, the one that faced the front door. But that night, we slept in the guest room because our grandma had recently broken her back and needed the double bed. The guest room had 2 single beds. The one I took was right next to the window, which faced the road outside. We turned off the lights, shut the blinds, and laid down to sleep at about 11 p.m. Then, in the middle of the night, I woke up. I could hear something. There was a tapping sound at the window. I was immediately uneasy. I tried to wake up my brother, but he was still sleeping. At first, I thought it might be our cousin Mila. She lived in the apartment just above my grandma's and was much older than us. Mila often came home drunk during the summer and sometimes forgot her keys. I figured she might be trying to get our attention so we could let her in.
Mila?
I called out. No answer. I got up and crept quietly into the living room, careful not to wake up my grandma. I opened the front door and stepped outside. No one was there. But then I looked at the guest room window. That's when I saw them. Long scratch marks made by fingernails streaking across the glass. Whoever had been tapping on the window wasn't doing it gently. It was aggressive. I rushed back inside, locked the door behind me, and went back to the guest room. I crawled into bed, heart pounding, and then it started again. Tap, tap, tap. Right outside the window. I ducked under the sheets, frozen. I wanted so badly to open the blinds and see who or what was out there, but something deep in my gut told me not to. I stayed like that for what felt like forever until I finally passed out from fear and exhaustion. In the morning, I asked my grandma if Mila had come home yet. She looked confused and told me,
No, Mila's out of town for the whole week.
That made my blood run cold. The town we were in is small, so small it barely counts as a town at all. It's more like a village. There's no hotel, no place for strangers to stay overnight. The closest town with a place to sleep is Varda, and that's about an hour and a half away. Whoever was outside my window that night wasn't a stranger passing through. They had to be someone local. At the time, I thought it might be a prank. There were only 2 other kids around, a pair of siblings who, like us, were there just for the holidays. They were loud, annoying, and always trying to mess with me and my brother. So I walked down the street to their house and rang the doorbell. No answer. I asked one of the neighbors about them, and they told me.
Oh, that family left 2 days ago. Went back to the capital.
So if it wasn't Mila, and it wasn't the only other kids in town, then who was tapping on our window? To this day, I still don't know, and I'm glad I never opened those blinds. God only knows what I would have seen.